My key was already in the lock when I heard my own name. He still thinks the family loves him. I froze. Not outside, inside. The front door had opened barely 2 inches, enough for voices to spill into the hallway. Not enough for anyone to notice I'd come home. Then my son laughed. Not the laugh I remembered from Little League games or family vacations. This one was different. Older, sharper. Like someone who no longer cared who got hurt. He'll never figure it out. Another voice answered. My daughter-in-law. What if he comes home early? Ryan chuckled. He won't. He never leaves work before 7. I slowly looked at my watch. 5:38. For the first time in 23 years, a cancelled meeting had saved my life. My name is Thomas Caldwell. I'm 62 years old. For 36 years I owned Caldwell Emergency Restoration. Not glamorous work. When a hospital flooded at 2 in the morning, we were there. When a courthouse caught fire, we rebuilt it. When hurricanes tore through neighborhoods, our trucks were usually the first ones arriving after the rescue crews left. People called us when their worst day had already happened. Maybe that's why I spent most of my life believing broken things could always be repaired. Buildings, businesses, families. I was wrong about one of them. After my wife, Deanne, died 6 years ago, the house became unbearably quiet. Ryan insisted I shouldn't live alone. Dad, it's too big for one person. Move in with us. You'll be closer to the grandkids. It'll be good for everyone. It sounded reasonable, logical, loving. So I sold my smaller condo, added the money to my retirement investments, and moved into the guest suite of the home I'd helped Ryan buy 5 years earlier. Technically, the house was in his name. I'd provided the down payment, paid for the renovations, even covered the mortgage during the first 2 years while his business struggled. None of that bothered me. Helping your children isn't a transaction. At least, it shouldn't be. The grandkids made every sacrifice feel worthwhile. Saturday pancakes, homework at the kitchen island, movie nights, camping trips. Those moments convinced me I'd made the right decision. Until little things began changing. Ryan stopped asking my opinion. My daughter-in-law, Melissa, started referring to the upstairs living room as our space. Family vacations somehow got booked after I'd already committed to volunteer work. They weren't pushing me out, not openly. They were simply designing a life where my absence no longer mattered. I noticed. I just chose not to believe it. Back in the hallway, Ryan spoke again. I almost feel bad. Melissa laughed. You. For about 5 seconds. More laughter. Then Ryan lowered his voice. The appraisal comes next Tuesday. My stomach tightened. Appraisal? Melissa asked, and after that, Ryan answered without hesitation. What? Tell him the truth. What truth? That it's time for him to find somewhere else to live. She sounded uncertain. What if he refuses? I won't. Why? Because he still thinks we're family. Silence. Then, the words that stopped my breathing. He has no idea the papers already signed. Papers? What papers? The house, my investments, my power of attorney. I searched my memory. Nothing. No appointments. No documents. No signatures. Unless someone had signed something without telling me. A loud bark echoed from the backyard. Buddy, my 12-year-old golden retriever. Ryan stood. I'll let him in. Footsteps moved toward the hallway, toward the front door. I quietly pulled it closed again, walked backward across the porch, slipped my keys into my pocket, then deliberately unlocked the door a second time. Loudly, I stepped inside. Anybody home? Ryan appeared around the corner smiling. Dad, you're home early. So it seems. Melissa walked into the hallway carrying a bowl of popcorn. The television was still paused. Everyone looked perfectly relaxed. Perfectly normal. If I hadn't arrived 2 minutes earlier, I'd have believed every second of it. Ryan smiled. How was work? I looked him straight in the eye. Interesting. He nodded. What happened? I smiled back. Oh, I found out someone I trusted has been lying to me. For the first time all evening, my son stopped smiling. That night, nobody mentioned the conversation I'd overheard. Ryan grilled steaks in the backyard. Melissa asked whether I wanted another baked potato. The kids argued over a board game. It looked like the kind of evening people post on social media with captions about gratitude. I smiled when I was expected to smile, laughed when everyone else laughed, and listened. People hiding something eventually become impatient with pretending. You just have to give them enough silence. At 9 o'clock, my grandson, Owen, wandered into my room. He was 9, too honest to keep secrets. Grandpa, yeah buddy, are you moving? The question hit harder than anything Ryan had said. What makes you ask that? He shrugged. Dad said your new place will probably have a fishing pond. My smile disappeared. A new place. He nodded innocently. They've been looking at houses for you. Houses? Yeah. He said old people like quiet neighborhoods. Before I could ask another question, Melissa called from downstairs. Owen, bedtime. He ran out, leaving me alone with a sentence that kept repeating inside my head. They've been looking at houses for you. Not with me. For me. The next morning I drove somewhere I hadn't visited in almost a year. My attorney's office. Margaret Ellis had represented me for nearly 30 years. She looked surprised when I walked in without an appointment. Thomas, this is unusual. I hope so. She closed her office door. What happened? I leaned forward. I need one question answered. Go ahead. Has anyone tried changing anything that belongs to me? She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she opened a secure file on her computer, then looked back at me. Your son visited 6 weeks ago. Every muscle in my body tightened. What did he want? He said you wanted to simplify your estate. I never said that. I know. She folded her hands. Which is why I refused. Relief washed over me. For what exactly? He asked about transferring your investment accounts into a family trust. And I told him I'd only discuss that with you. I sat back quietly. So nothing changed. She hesitated. Not here. That one word. Here. What do you mean? There are other things that concern me. She reached into a folder and slid a business card across the desk. Harrison Valuation Group. They called twice. Why? Asking whether I'd verified ownership percentages. Ownership of what? She looked confused. The house. I stared at her. The house belongs to Ryan. She slowly shook her head. No, it doesn't. I blinked. I paid the down payment. I know. You loaned him the money. I know. You also paid for every renovation. I know. She turned her monitor toward me. County property records. Original purchase agreement. Supplemental ownership filing. I read the names twice, then a third time. Thomas Caldwell. Ryan Caldwell. Joint tenants. I looked back at Margaret. I never knew this. You signed it at closing. I don't remember. You were grieving. She said it gently. Your wife had been gone less than 3 months. I closed my eyes. I barely remembered that year. I remembered funeral flowers, hospital bills, long nights. Not legal paperwork. Margaret spoke softly. You own half that property. Half. Ryan had spent years acting as though I was simply living in his house. He knew. I didn't. As I drove home, another thought hit me. If Ryan already knew I owned half, why order an appraisal? Unless the appraisal wasn't about selling the house. It was about determining what my half was worth. And if someone already had papers prepared, they weren't planning a conversation. They were planning a transaction without me. When I pulled into the driveway, a luxury black SUV was parked outside. A man in a tailored gray suit stood on the porch with Ryan. Neither noticed me. The stranger handed Ryan a leather folder. Ryan smiled. I'll make sure he signs. The man laughed. At his age, I probably won't read past the first page. They shook hands. Ryan turned and saw me standing beside my truck. His smile disappeared instantly. The stranger looked at me, then back at Ryan. No one spoke. I walked up the driveway, looked directly at the leather folder in Ryan's hands, then calmly asked, should I start reading now? Or were you planning to wait until after dinner? Ryan recovered first. Dad, it's nothing. The man in the gray suit forced a polite smile. I think there's been a misunderstanding. I held out my hand. I'm Thomas Caldwell. If you're here to discuss my property, I'd like to know exactly who you are. The man hesitated. Ryan answered instead. He's just an appraiser. I looked back at the stranger. Is that true? He shifted uncomfortably. I also handle acquisition consulting. Acquisition, not appraisal. Acquisition. That one word told me everything. Ryan laughed nervously. We were just exploring options. For what? The house. Our house. I corrected him immediately. Or, not yours. For the first time, I watched genuine panic flash across my son's face. He hadn't expected me to know. You knew. I know now. Silence. Then Ryan tried changing strategies. Dad, we wanted to surprise you. I almost smiled. A surprise. We found a beautiful retirement community. Melissa stepped outside. It has a lake. And medical staff. You'd love it. Neither of them noticed what they had just admitted. They weren't asking. They had already chosen. I looked at the folder Ryan was still holding. Open it, Dad. Open it. His hands stayed still. The consultant quietly handed the folder to me instead. I think you should read it yourself. Inside, everything became clear. Purchase proposal, independent valuation, property restructuring agreement, and attached to the back, a voluntary buyout contract. Ryan wanted me to sell my 50% ownership for barely half of its market value. Once I signed, the house would belong entirely to him. He could refinance it, use the equity, expand his struggling business, and I'd be living in a retirement complex I'd never chosen. The entire plan depended on one assumption, that I still believed every decision they made was for my own good. I closed the folder. Interesting. Ryan relaxed. You understand? Oh, I understand perfectly. That evening I didn't argue. I didn't accuse anyone. I simply called Margaret. I'd like to activate Plan Redwood. She answered immediately. I hoped you'd never need it. So did I. Years earlier, after Diane died, Margaret had insisted I prepare for the possibility that grief might cloud my judgment. She convinced me to create a contingency plan. Not for strangers, for family. If anyone ever pressures you into transferring major assets, call me before you sign anything. At the time, I thought it was unnecessary. Now, it became my greatest protection. The next morning, letters were delivered. One to Ryan, one to me. Mine confirmed that every personal investment account, every commercial property, every company share, every retirement fund remained solely under my control. Ryan's letter was different. It notified him that Caldwell Emergency Restoration had officially completed its long-planned transition. The company wasn't being sold. It was becoming employee-owned. For years, I had quietly transferred ownership into a trust benefiting the people who had spent decades rebuilding lives beside me. The foreman, the project managers, the office staff, the men and women who answered emergency calls at 3 in the morning. Not because I distrusted Ryan, because he had never wanted the company. He always wanted what the company could buy. There was a difference, a very expensive difference. That afternoon, Ryan stormed into my study. No, I rewarded the people who built it.
What about you?
What about you? I'm your son. Yes.
You are. He stared at me. You were supposed to leave it to family. I looked directly into his eyes. I did. He frowned. What? I left it to the people who treated me like family. His face went pale. For the first time, he realized this was never about money. It was about loyalty, and loyalty couldn't be inherited, only earned. He opened his mouth to argue again. Instead, the doorbell rang. Margaret walked inside carrying another sealed envelope. She looked directly at Ryan. I believe. This belongs to you. Ryan frowned as he opened it. 30 seconds later, the color drained completely from his face. He whispered only 4 words. You can't do this. I calmly answered, I already did. Ryan's hands were shaking so badly the envelope slipped onto the floor. He picked it up again, read the first page, then flipped to the second. This has to be a mistake. Margaret remained calm. It isn't. Melissa hurried into the room. What happened? Ryan couldn't answer, so I did. The agreement says either owner may request a court-supervised partition if the co-owners can no longer peacefully share the property. Melissa looked from me to Ryan. What does that mean? It means, I've decided we shouldn't live together anymore. Silence filled the room. Not angry silence, defeated silence. Ryan finally found his voice. So you're forcing us to sell the house? No, I gave you another option. He looked down again. Buy my half, at full market value. Not the discounted number hidden inside his folder. The real number and independent valuation. No tricks, no pressure, no lies. If you truly believe this house is your family's future, you can buy my share. If not, we sell it fairly. For the first time, Ryan understood what fairness actually cost. The appraisal arrived 3 days later. Neither of us expected the number. The neighborhood had exploded in value because of a new medical research campus being built only 2 miles away. The house was worth nearly 3 times what we'd paid for it. Ryan stared at the report. His plan had depended on convincing me my share was worth very little. Instead, my half alone was worth more than his entire business. His shoulders slumped. He couldn't afford it, not even close. Over the following weeks, reality moved much faster than anger. Ryan's lender refused to refinance. His business partner backed out of an expansion. The consultant who had prepared the buyout quietly disappeared. Without my signature, every shortcut collapsed. Meanwhile, the employee ownership announcement spread through the company. I received dozens of handwritten letters. One foreman wrote, "You gave us something we never imagined possible." Another employee wrote, "For 30 years you treated us like partners before the paperwork ever said we were." Those letters meant more than any balance sheet ever could. One evening Ryan knocked on my bedroom door, not barged in.
Knocked. Dad.
You awake? Come in. He looked older. Not because time had passed, because pride had finally become heavy. He sat down without speaking. After nearly a minute, he quietly asked, "When did you stop trusting me?" I looked at him. "I didn't. You stopped being trustworthy." His eyes dropped to the floor. "I kept telling myself I deserved more. I know. I thought, after everything you'd built, it would all be mine anyway." I nodded slowly, and somewhere along the way, you forgot I was still alive. Tears filled his eyes, real ones, not the desperate kind, the ashamed kind. "I'm sorry, I know you are, but understand something. I can forgive betrayal. It's much harder to forget planning it." 6 months later, the house was sold, exactly as the agreement required. Neither side manipulated the process. Neither side cheated. We simply divided what belonged to each of us. I bought a smaller waterfront home 20 minutes away, large enough for family dinners, small enough to feel peaceful. Ryan and Melissa downsized to a home they could truly afford. For the first time in years, they built a life using their own income instead of my safety net. Strangely, that was the best thing that ever happened to them. Last month, my granddaughter asked why I smiled every time we drove past one of my company's restoration trucks. I looked through the windshield, watched young crews heading toward another family having the worst day of their lives. Then I answered, "Because those people know something I almost forgot." "What?" I smiled. "The strongest foundations aren't poured with concrete. They're built with character." She squeezed my hand, and this time, when my family laughed, I knew it was real.